What's good, everybody? Hey, welcome to the Road Home podcast. My name's Justin,
I'm Amanda.
and this one is titled Give Me
Give
Your
me
Ashes. So, we're going to talk about a variety of different things. I'm wearing a hoodie, and I don't know if I need to wear a hoodie tonight, but I started wearing a hoodie, so I'm not going to disrobe during. This is
What
as
we're
good as it
doing.
gets. I haven't been feeling amazing, so
Well, we're here.
I'm here. I'm showing up. Showing up counts, even if you don't feel amazing. So,
Everyone says if you have 30% and you give all 30%, you give 100%.
that's fair. But I'm giving my 30% that I have. So today's title is Give Me Your Ashes.
Yeah.
Last time we talked a little bit about the beginnings of the recovery tour and what that looks like and
How it came to be.
Some of the little timelines and storylines that were taking place. And we felt like we're going to pick back up and kind of conclude that later, but we felt that it would be important, that it would be maybe good to discuss. Okay, if we're talking about recovery, if we're talking about, restoration or, just healing,
Yeah.
what are we healing from? Like what is specifically happened? What did we, what do we have? What do we not have? What are we believing for? What's realistic? What's unrealistic? And those kind of things. So I don't know. You talk for a second while we're.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said about being honest. I think so many people are willing to share like the highlight reel and, we were doing bad and now we're doing great. So let's tell you about all the great things that are happening. But you don't get the great without the bad. And you don't learn the lessons that you need to learn in those seasons to help you be better in the really good seasons. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that recovery can be messy. Recovery and healing can be messy.
It can take a long time.
And it can take time. And that doesn't mean you're not still healing. That doesn't mean you're not still recovering or on your way to recovery or on your way to the goal that you have set. But yeah, you're allowed to be human in the process. And God's not afraid of that. Holy Spirit is not scared of you in any way, shape, or form and your experience with what happened. So,
and I think on the road to recovery, there's speed bumps, there's stop signs, there are yellow lights, there are red lights, there are green lights.
There's all sorts of signs.
Yeah, there's potholes. There's all the things. So that is to be expected. And just because you experience maybe some of those pauses or stops, or maybe we thought we were going to stay here overnight and we stayed here 3 days, or maybe we thought this was a little thing and it was a big thing, or maybe we thought it was a big thing and it was a little thing. Like all of these are options. And again, I think we'd said it in one of the earlier ones that hey, if anything, we just want to be like, hey, if you can learn from our mistakes, learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely.
If you can learn from our successes, then learn from them.
Yeah.
And one of the things for me in the last few weeks that I feel is significant is maybe we began doing this as an act of obedience, or we think we're supposed to and we don't know. And then sometimes you question either the validity of what you're doing or its impact or weight. And I'm convinced that it matters. Some of the feedback that we have been getting recently and have gotten in the last little bit has been really profound and really important, which defies the way that I feel about it, to be honest. I don't know if I'm doing that. I'm doing this. This is the way it's going to be. I'm not liking the hat.
Okay.
There we go. I'm not liking the hat. This is what it is. But I'm not feeling amazing. But sometimes if we believe the lie that I have to feel amazing for it to matter, like you said, showing up is half the battle. So I'll let you talk for a second about, okay, what is it going into the recovery tour ahead of time? Aside from the practicals, if we need an RV and we need money and we need resources and we don't know, what were some of your thoughts? What were you nervous about? What were you excited about? What was your greatest hope? And then what was your greatest fear about this journey
Yeah.
leading into it?
Gosh, you went deep on the first one.
Yeah.
So this is a real thing. And if you don't know me, you'll get to know me, I think, over these next few podcasts that we do. Hopefully. I'm a crier, so I'm going to do my best not to cry through any conversations to the point where you can't understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So I think, all the administrative stuff aside, all of the planning aside, I was coming out of a season where I had made a lot of mistakes. I was having a lot of breakdowns that led to breakthroughs, but the breakdowns were hard and painful, and they hurt not only me and us, but other people around us. And so there's a lot of shame and guilt attached to that. And really, if I had any confidence going into the breakdowns, I lost all of it coming out. I remember even having a conversation in the depths of what we were walking through and telling Justin, like, I've never felt like I actually had more to share with people and less confidence in my authenticity to say it. Because what I was going through mattered, and what I was learning in the process mattered. But I felt like I had lost all my credibility to share that, or to teach that, or to convey that to anyone that should listen to me. Like, here I am, I'm just a hot mess. Why would anybody listen to me? These are all my mistakes I made. Look at the buffet. Don't pick any of these things and do something different. And so I think going into the recovery tour for me personally, I was terrified because I knew God was going to ask me to speak, and I didn't trust my voice anymore. And that's something I think I still struggle with, trusting my voice. And maybe we all do. Does what we have to say matter? Does what we have to say resonate with anyone but ourselves? Or because of past mistakes, past failures, will anyone actually listen? So yeah, I think for me, there was a lot of nerves between me and Holy Spirit, and I would talk to him, and because I knew that we were going to do this as a family. It wasn't just me in the background wrestling with kids and keeping the kids happy while he did all of the preaching and teaching and ministering. I knew it was going to be a whole family affair, and it wasn't just on him, it was on me too. Yeah. And I couldn't hide anymore. And there was a part of me that didn't want to hide anymore, but being seen is scary. So I think for me, that was my biggest fear going into it. My biggest hope was that for the first time, we were going to be ministering together, and I really wanted it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think what you said, being seen, is scary.
Yeah.
And different experiences too. So like, we'll pause and like, I'll let Amanda talk, Amanda let me talk, and then we'll kind of like go back and forth together. That didn't probably exist in our marriage prior to 2021 much. Where it's just kind of like one would have an experience, and then it's just kind of like an awkward, I don't know what to do with that. And then you just let someone live their life, and you live your life, and they're adjacent or in tandem, but it's not entirely together. But like, I think it's vital, it's necessary with things like we've gone through, navigated, are still processing in real time on the daily, of like, you got to let people have their space to have their experience. And like, a big thing I've learned, and I think we've just learned in general, is like, let people speak for themselves.
Mhm.
I think it's fair. I think you can let people speak for themselves when they're ready to. I also
Mhm.
think you shouldn't force people to say stuff when it's not time for them to say stuff. But like your experience is different because you had a different history leading up to it than
Mhm.
I did, and I think I can relate to being seen as scary. I'm a very public person. If you're watching this, you know that. What you see is what you get. You're not going to wonder where you stand with me. If you know me, you
Mhm.
know that's true. I That's just kind of the way it is, and I live my life very visibly. And then because of that, when we went through trials, it was very visible, and I can identify or relate to a ton of shame and embarrassment connected to some of the stuff we faced in our marriage and in our family. That was, regardless of how it began, it just was right, and
Mhm.
it compromised a lot of relationships and
Yeah.
created a lot of embarrassment and stuff there. And like for me, I had always I was taking pride is probably an accurate way. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but it's an accurate description of taking pride in like character being above reproach, living a certain way, track records clean, squeaky clean, like all those things. And then like you come into some of the stuff with some of the accusations and the slander and the swirl. And regardless of the weight or merit of it, which there was none, um, this had taken root in a lot of gossip and slander in relationships that I had held in a ministry space, and
Mhm.
people that I used to consider family that just are no longer in the picture. And a lot of things that get back around. You hear people call you up and say, "Hey, this person said this, that, and the other." And for me, I had spent so much time, effort, and energy building reputation, thinking it was like an admirable thing, and I didn't have it anymore, or at least I
Mhm.
didn't perceive that I had it, and I could not, like, I was dying a thousand deaths because this person said this, or I can't believe people believe that about me, or like those things. So I was ashamed that I couldn't handle it, like that we couldn't get this, that it had come to this. I think that
Mhm.
was very shameful for me. Then also I hold tremendous like weight on scripture and like the standards in the New Testament for like what a minister should do. And I was thoroughly convinced that I was disqualified because my house was out of order, and I'd sworn off ministry altogether. I had openly said to you
Mhm.
and to other people, I will never minister again. I will definitely never minister as long as we're married and together, and
Mhm.
I'll never mix my family and ministry again because there was so much pain connected to
Yeah.
it. Um, the goal was never for me to run around and do what I was doing absent from you. That was never
Yeah.
my goal. It was a reality that was kind of thrust upon us, and I don't think you can really understand or grasp the gravity of the situation. But our lives from 2016 to 2018 were um, absolutely, there was a momentum and something that happened that was
Mhm.
otherworldly that was on it that we just didn't ask for. And we just,
Yeah.
I think we did well, all things considered, but it was never the goal to be in separate places to the best of our
Mhm.
ability. And that's kind of what I'd always wanted. And I was like, did it have to go this way for this
Right.
to happen? And for me, I didn't want to stand up again because it's just so embarrassed. There's a great deal of shame. And I think at this
Mhm.
point too, um, leading into this, I hadn't fully experienced the deliverance that I have since.
Mm.
The shame and the disappointment that was connected to, in my mind, and my thinking, and my upbringing, and church, religion, background, family that I came from. If you do everything right, everything will go well.
Mm.
If you follow the rules, if you
Yeah.
cross your T's, if you dot your I's, it will go well with you. If you obey the Lord, if
Yeah.
you stay away from sin. And that was proving not to be true for me. And then that's hard enough on its own. But
Mhm.
then we're like, okay, well, the situations leading up to this, had put us against each other. So we're not on great terms. Like we're rebuilding a relationship,
Rebuilding a lot
honestly,
of
from nothing.
trust.
I mean, like
Mhm.
it would, shot it to shit. It was not good.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of rebuilding of trust, and it was very scary. I think so. For me, this is it. So, ministry, the place I felt most alive, and the spaces I felt most alive was family and ministry. And the places that got attacked for me were family and ministry. So places I felt most connected and alive in, I now had just boatloads of trauma there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it.
Altered.
You know,
It
so I was
altered.
having,
Yeah.
it changed me forever to like now I don't know that I'll ever be the same, you know? So like that was terrifying to me. And there was the anxiety and the panic attacks and the depression. I would call it depression. And then I was not dealing with it well, you know, like we saved family and marriage and all that. But also I'm like, man, am I broken forever was a question I had.
Yeah.
I won't talk about that forever, but it's a good place for you to jump in and
Yeah.
say things in words.
No, and I think for me, watching him struggle with his identity, with his purpose, with just who God is and who, you know, all the existential things that you experience when you really go through a trauma. There was just a ton of pain for me, a ton of shame for me, because I knew that had I made different choices, maybe this could have gone differently. So just like coming to terms with that and daily forgiving myself so I could show up for the person that I cared about in a way that was authentic, in a way that was trying to think. Because for a lot of years I hid to I was a peacekeeper instead of a peacemaker. Or you know what I mean? Like I hid and I didn't talk and I didn't share or I said too much or I shared too much, or you know, I constantly was trying to bend to other people, but never like really fully myself. Mainly because I didn't trust people. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust other people around me. A lot of it, you know, has to do with the way that I grew up and my family and the experiences that I had. And through all of this, I actually realized I didn't trust God. And so as a result, I pushed him away. I closed myself off. People that I cared about, I hurt, because it was more of a, I'm going to reject you before you have a chance to reject me kind of mentality. And so for me, on the other side of that, after getting some serious deliverance, getting some serious inner healing and physical healing and taking care of my body, mind, soul, spirit, all of it, recognizing that I wasn't going to show up that way anymore, because if I really cared about people, if I really loved people, I was going to be authentic. I was going to be honest. I was going to be present, even when it hurt, even when there was a chance that I was going to be rejected, even when there was a chance that it wasn't going to feel good, that I might not be completely safe. I'm still going to show up because I loved them enough to show up. I loved Justin enough to show up. I love my kids enough to show up. That love doesn't operate like this. Love operates open.
No.
And that was life-changing for me. It may not be for some of you, but for me, it was life-changing to realize that love doesn't protect itself first. It leaves itself open.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's good because I've just been in church my whole life. And I always thought that was a good thing, you know, like, and I might ruffle some feathers in saying this, and I don't really care because I'm just going to talk, but like, I don't know that gave me a balanced worldview, or like, I think it was people did the best they could with what they had, and they told me what they believed to be true at the time,
Yeah.
whether it was merited or not. And like again, I can't stress that at like my latter 30s, mid to later 30s, my whole grid and framework for existence and what I believe to be true was shaking and quaking. And I'm because it was not only this, but this led to a lot of other things that were like really existential for me, and they were bad, like not understated, not exaggerated. Like they were very bad things that I'm still convinced a season of our lives was curated by the enemy to like break us and take us out.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you can't go under it. You just got to go through it.
Yeah.
And we were kind of going through it. So with Amanda's, heart posture, she's repentant, she's working on herself. Never seen her more proactive, showing up, like doing the work. And I was mad at her. I just am dealing with this resentment that I've never had on a regular basis. And I'm torn because I'm like, I know the right answer is, keep no record of wrongs and forgive. And I can't remember, but like, I remember, it's all I can think about. It's like a nonstop loop in my head. And I can't, like, to the point where I'm having panic attacks all the time because my body's like so freaked out about like, well, we thought we were good before and we weren't good. And this happened and this thing. And I felt like my body betrayed me and my brain. And then like, because I was so wired into the word of the Lord, and if you obey and if you follow God, it will go well with you. And it's clearly not going well with me. And like, am I crazy?
Yeah.
Like, do I hear God? Like am I prophetic, or have I been bipolar, or like all these things my whole life? And maybe I convinced myself that it was right. Now I don't have any evidence to prove that that's true. It was really, really hard for me, all of that considered. And then we're like, yeah, let's do this recovery tour thing. Like, is this just a relapse? Like, have I not learned my lesson by now? So, and then this is something I did want to talk about. And it's open conversation. It's uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable to watch. It's not the most comfortable thing to have, but like, this is necessary. Because I honestly, this makes us closer, because before we could never talk about this. Before we just, like you said,
got quiet.
You get quiet, and we would, keep the peace, but there's no peacemaking because it was not authentic, and it wasn't helpful, and it didn't serve us or our relationship connection or our marriage. And I don't really know that the Lord was honored in it, but like within marriages and within church and religious culture, like there's much to be said about forgiveness. And like, if someone, cheats, or someone steps out, or there's abuse or whatever, there's much to be said about, well, you forgive that one, and it's almost like there's a band of people rally around the person who failed. But it gets really lonely for the person who didn't, the person who kind of showed up to begin with. And that was very much how I felt, where I was like, I didn't do, I'm not perfect at all. No. I'm in no way, shape, or form do I believe that. But like, in a lot of these situations, like, I did the right things. Therapist, counselors, all these people would say, oh, you did the right things, and it just wasn't reciprocated. And then I had resentment and anger because of that, and I'm still dealing with the scars, the wounds. I'm broken, and you seem to be doing well.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a little bit? Because I think there was a real tension, because like, I think it was very evident that you were doing well. Like, I could see it, and I was so, like, I never wanted to be the person that was so upset at someone for doing well, but I was.
Yeah.
That was really hard for me, because like, I love you, and I'm happy for you, and I don't know what to do with that. So you talk.
No, I remember telling someone that I trusted. I didn't talk about it with a lot of people. It was very much a solo season between me and the Lord and my therapist. But I remember sitting down with a friend, and I said, I feel like I'm living out the prodigal story, only I'm the prodigal son who made all the wrong choices, who made all the mistakes, who went out and utterly failed and hurt their family in the process, disgraced their family by leaving and taking their inheritance and squandering it, And I've come back, and the Lord has accepted me. But it felt like my husband was that son who stayed, the son who was faithful, the son who worked hard, the son who showed up every day, the son who was there helping his dad day in and day out. And then, kind of like what you said, it was like, the dad's throwing me a party, and the one who stayed, the one who was faithful is like, but what about me? And for me, and this was the grace of the Lord, because it was very painful to listen when he would share his anger, share his resentment, share the pain that he was experiencing. Was painful for me, because I felt like there was just no words, to fix what had happened, and I couldn't go back and change it. All I could do was be present now and affect the future, And so for me, there was a lot of grace poured out to have patience, to be able to sit and listen in that season. Because in a way I knew what he was going through, because I had suffered silently with a lot of the same existential questions. He, maybe not the exact same, but who is God, and what, like, that, do I hear him? And I had wrestled with that on my own, and to see him in a place where I never thought he would be. Like, he is the strongest person I know. When he hears the Lord, he is locked in 100%. You cannot change his mind. I still believe that to this day. He may not believe that about himself, but I know, like, and even in the process of what we went through and what we were going through, and I just knew, like, if the Lord would speak to him, like, everything's going to be okay, because I know this man and he loves the Lord. Like, as much pain as he's in, he loves the Lord. And if he could just hear his voice, even for a second, like, it would change everything. But he was just so lost there for a while. And so I just had to sit and wait patiently. But it was hard for me to watch it, and then to also realize that, or to know that it was a lot of my fault, that he was even having to walk through this in this way. Not that he would have never had these questions or never experienced these things, but this way.
Yeah.
Through my hands, through actions, through words that I had hurled at him, that hurt him. And so for me, I think it was just the grace of the Lord to have patience and sit and watch you go through this process, and not rush you through it, and not try and, like, force you out of that way of thinking too quickly.
Well, just to let me think.
Yeah.
And to let me have time. I remember being so very upset when I initially went to counsel people, because one of my deeper fears was that, and it's still something that I think about, is like, if I didn't serve this purpose for people, would they love me? Like, if I couldn't move in miracles, or, like, God showed up in a room, would people actually like me? If I couldn't prophesy, would people still want to be around? Like, would I still have friends? And it was like at least the first 5 people that I sought counsel from, all they talked about was, like, God restoring my ministry. And I was real upset about that.
Yeah.
Because nobody talked about me. Like, I was broken. I was hurting. I'm articulating that. I'm saying this to people's faces. Like, I hurt. I'm broken. I need help. And all they can talk about is, what is the quickest course of action to get you back in the saddle again? And I was like, F that, like we're on YouTube. I'm going to let a few slip tonight. So this will not be PG. If you have children, you might want to watch it first and then go back. But I was so mad at that. Because even in the brokenness, I was like, this is an idol for you guys.
Mm.
And my goal is not to fix this so I can minister. That's never it. And it never was. Like, I'm thankful that I've gotten to do what I've gotten to do, but it's out of my overflow relationship with Jesus that I get to do that. I've not, maybe in my early 20s, I might have elevated ministry to that place, but it's been a very long time. I don't care about that at all. I don't. And I've walked away from a lot of things, and I'm just like, I don't want to be restored to ministry. I don't want to lose my family. I would like for this, to not be going this way. And that was very hard. And then I just really remember my experience was there were 3 people that actually listened to me and heard me. And that was really unfortunate because I've poured my life out for my whole life for everybody else. I mean, the amount of times that I've shown up for people in crisis, and then just people dipped on me, and the people that should have been the closest were there, and I'm in the middle of that. And, and a lot of that was, because of such decisions that were not mine that were made. And I don't know, it was a very interesting thing because you use the prodigal, and we always preach about the prodigal, and like that story is deeper than we make it.
Yeah.
Because the thing about sin is like nobody talks you into sin. You make that choice. You choose that, just like you choose righteousness. And this idea that what you like, for me, again, hardwired, what you do, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, everybody that's done the wrong things is getting rewarded. And I feel like I'm being punished, and I'm the only one with the scars.
Yeah.
And like, where's my defender? Where's my advocate? Where's my people? And they were few and far between. So don't want to go too deep into this. I mean, it's obviously we're painting a picture. I want to talk about some of this because I never voiced it before.
Yeah.
And you might be there now. I don't know where you're at, but it's okay for it to take as long as it takes. And it's okay for you to process those feelings. I was never able to like process those feelings and get in touch with them. And, it had helped create and perpetuate a life that we'd been living to this point that was no longer, the Lord's like, this is not going to happen anymore. But here with this invitation into recovery and restoration. So let's talk about that. Let's get like dialed into this. So marriage would be one thing. Because at this point, like, we're married and that's it. We're married, and there's not much to be spoken for connection or relationship. We're just here. We have 3 children. We have our affairs, and we're like, we have our affairs that we're managing and all of this. But like outside of that, like, what are we and who are we? And rebuilding from nothing, hence the title, Give Me Your Ashes. It was so interesting because that's all I felt like I had anymore was ashes. And so many bad things were happening so close together. I didn't think I could deal with it, and I couldn't a lot of days. Getting out of bed was a big deal, and I never could figure that one out. Prior, you would ask me what's depression, anxiety, all this stuff. Like, I would have even known what to do. And then after, it's like, no, I know exactly what that's like. Got a great deal of empathy. So, but I remember somewhere in this time, Chris Valentin got this word from the Lord, and he shared it at Bethel. And I think you guys were gone. So just one of the many days that I was sitting at the house alone, just feeling very, very deeply sad. And he gave this message. I might put the link in the comments for you to go watch later. Basically where the Lord came to him and said, give me your ashes. Like, I can make beautiful things out of ashes, but you have to give them to me first. And I remember, like, it was the first time I felt the Lord in a long time. And I remember he was even like, you need to activate this, like, wherever you're at, stand up, hand your ashes. I remember standing up in the living room by myself, giving the Lord my ashes. And like, he met me, and it was preceding this. And I felt like there was something significant. Like, sometimes we have lines in the sand with the Lord that are really powerful for us. And I was like, okay, I got a lot of those. I don't have anything else. I got a ton of ashes. So here's this. And it wasn't like the Lord said, it's time to stop being sad. But it was kind of those like, hey, get up, wash your face, put on some clothes, and get out and about and start looking, start moving.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're just sitting and you're still and you're stagnant, you're not going to see what you need to do. I heard Jocko the other day, the podcast guy, he was like, hey, if you're sitting in the woods and you don't know what to do and you can't see a way out, start moving, because your perspective will change. As your perspective will change, you start to see other options. And I remember that. I was like, okay, Lord, here's my ashes. You go.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know, I feel like I've lived my life in the ashes. I've never found, like, fully stepped into the beautiful part of it. And so, yeah, I think there's something so powerful about what you said, and just offering it up to the Lord, and making that line in the sand. And it wasn't around a ton of people. It wasn't around, like, it was just you and the Lord. And I think those moments are really important in a healing process, in a recovery process, because healing is so messy. It doesn't always have to be right out in front of everybody. I think so many times we watch people heal publicly, and they end up bleeding all over everyone. And so I think there was something to be said about the way that you walked through that season, and even continuing to walk through, that there was wisdom and understanding in how you navigated that with the Lord. I liked, I mean, I was in awe of how vulnerable you were with yourself in that process, and how you didn't hide it. Like, I knew when you were having a rough day. I knew when you were.
How could you tell? What gave it away?
And I would just, in those moments, Holy Spirit just set me, so I could be that support for him that I maybe should have been all along, and so to watch you go through that in such a humble way and with such wisdom, I mean, if anyone is going through a season where you have walked through betrayal, accusation, you feel like, I have done everything right, everything, like, watch this guy, because the truths that he shares are accurate, and he is not going to lie to you about the healing process and about what it looked like for you. And I think that's been the most beautiful thing for me to see. It's painful for me, being sometimes, the cause of some of the hurt that he's cycling through. But it's an honor to watch you go through this process.
Well, that's a nice thing to say.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, I think too, to stress, like, the vulnerability, I don't think is a new thing. I don't think it's a new thing. It's just this experience is new. So it's not that we had been, or I had been burying or hiding anything in the past. I think it's just that I've never experienced this before, and I don't know how to navigate it. Like I said earlier, like, I'm a public person and I'm an open book, and I've learned some boundaries with people that I did need to learn. But that being said, I'm still an open book. And I do think that part of, stepping away from all the do I hear God and coming back to the more healed side of, like, I can't shake this. Like, this is who I am. And if there's a world where I'm not doing this, then I'm not being me. I may be like kneeling to someone's perception of me, or
Mhm.
maybe this makes you uncomfortable, but this is actually where I feel most alive. And I lost so much of that I had to regain it, and part of
Mhm.
my healing process is why we do stuff like this. Why would you ever do this? Well, I've got the better part of 10, 15 years of emails and messages, private messages, DMs, where people have been at the end of their rope and they watch something random. I don't know, there might be 150 people watch this video. I don't know. That's not
Mhm.
very many
Mhm.
in today's world. But the percentage of the people that watch this video or videos like it, and there's actually power in a testimony to change their life or to release hope or to open their eyes to see something, that has been the presiding experience over our life.
Mhm.
And for every antagonist or person that says, shh, stop saying that, don't do that, oh, that's cringe, whatever, there have been twice as many that said, you saved our life, you saved our family, you saved our marriage.
Mhm.
I was going to walk away from the Lord, but I didn't,
Yeah.
all of those things. So like we come back to here, and this is where we are in this process. And I think that within the Christian space, within ministry, we are trained, we are conditioned, we are told, we are taught, we are all the things to only let people see so much of you. And it really perpetuates some things that are unhealthy.
Mhm.
A lot of the advice that we got that put us in the space that we were in was from well meaning people whose lives were a shit show, you know?
Mhm.
And they never stopped doing ministry. They never stopped running the things. They never stopped preaching the party lines, but it just wasn't authentic. And like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So if it's good, you'll know it. If it's bad, you're going to know it. And I think the beauty in that is that you're never going to be like super shocked, like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. So in this give me your ashes part, I think what we want to say to you, and we don't want to hover around the deep, dark, ugly too much, but like it really doesn't matter how bad it is or how
Mhm.
far you've fallen from grace or how deep you're in it now, or maybe like you're on the road to recovery and you're having some bad weeks. I mean, I didn't think I could be as bad as I was for as long as I was. I
Mhm.
still am wrestling with the constructs of grace, and mercy. And to be honest with you, I've needed it more in the last 2 years than I've ever needed it in my life. Um, and I had just never lived in a world where I thought it was accessible to me.
Mhm.
And like every time you get introduced to that, you find it's like a kid exploring like the parameters of like, what can I do and what can I not do? I feel like I'm there. And then there's a lot of things that you learn later that I feel like I've already learned.
Yeah.
So
Do you feel
go.
like when you step into those deeper places of grace and mercy, even though you may be feeling like not yourself, do you feel closer to the Lord in those moments where you realize
Hmm.
you're actually dipping deeper into his grace and his mercy, where maybe when you thought everything was okay,
Hmm. Yeah. I
you
mean,
weren't tapping into it?
I don't think I would have had any grid for grace or mercy before. Because on paper, in the way that I am wired, is black and white, right and
Yeah.
wrong. So I do my best to authentically live out what I believe.
Mhm.
So I'm like never in a gray space, and I feel like I was broken in a way that I couldn't function, and I needed it to live.
Mm.
So I feel his nearness there. But then there's also been like this thing for me of like self-loathing and
Yeah.
a great deal of self-hatred of like, why can't you get your stuff together? That's been very hard. And I think that's for like me where grace has been there, because some people's mind or like maybe, I don't know, I can't speak for other people, but like I always knew the Lord would show up. So every time I've ministered
Mhm.
or preach or a teacher, whatever, the Lord always shows up. So I never once equated that to me. It was just like,
Mm.
if I preach his word and I do these things. But I was so convinced and still wrestle with, did I disqualify myself from those things because of this? Because I have a high standard for the word. I think he's removing some legalistic things that I didn't know were
Mm.
there. That he's introducing me to some things, like even because we talk about fears and getting introduced. It's like I don't have high regard for people that live loose lives or like with mixture
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And I think the Lord has been showing me slowly but surely that maybe some places that I thought, oh, this is mixture. Maybe I was being judgmental and I had a skewed view that was
Wow.
causing me to stiff arm grace a
Yeah.
bit. So that's helpful. And then also too, just the whole area of like my own will and desire. Like I just don't really, yeah, like the ministry space is a very complicated issue for me now.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a little bit. I mean,
Yeah. And I think for us, even how we have engaged in the ministry space since then has been a lot more of me taking the lead in our personal ministry and
Mhm.
what's been happening. But then there's been, for me, like he's the Bible guy. Like you ask me normal like I am the teacher of teachers. Like you ask me anything in regards to that, I feel very confident. And I have had experiences with the Lord, but I did not start really walking with him until I was 15. I feel like
Which is young.
Yeah, which is young.
Yeah.
But in comparison to you, that's about like,
It's a year different.
huh?
It's a year different.
But like, no, found the Lord at
Yeah,
15.
yeah.
You grew up.
I'm not normal though.
Yeah. So almost, an extra 10 years in his walk with the Lord, even though it was during childhood, but still. And so feeling wholly unqualified to step into that place, and then coming out of what I felt like was such a dark season for me, a shameful season for me, because I made a lot of bad choices. And I also want to clarify, like, there were no major moral failures in our marriage, in our relationship. It was just a lot of hurtful, emotional betrayal, just with words. So like your words have power. When you're talking to your friends about your day and your family and your relationships, like those things matter outside of the conversation that you're having. And and how I navigate my friendships, I will never be one of those people who are demeaning, belittling to my spouse, to my partner. Again, I found I had gotten into those rhythms and patterns, and that was honestly one of the worst things I could have ever done, and led into the darkest season of our marriage. And so coming into ministry and feeling like, okay, I'm going to take this over, but he's the well-known guy. I've been the one at home with the kids. I've been the one that just comes on the trips occasionally, comes to the services occasionally, sit in the back. I read my Bible. I spend time with the Lord, but do I really have knowledge or wisdom to impart to people in a way that ministers to them, that encourages them, that lifts them up, that, and so that's been this thing that I've been leaning into with the Lord, that as I write and as I sit with him and then I share my thoughts, it's a very vulnerable place for me in this season, because I don't always know if I'm hearing correctly or
Well, I think the ROI is different.
yeah.
So, and I think this could be helpful for somebody
Yeah.
or some people where it's like, okay, You, the Bible says this: "Don't be deceived. God is not mocked. What a man or woman sows, they will reap." So this is true.
Yeah,
So there is the grace mercy paradigm. There's also
absolutely.
the you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
So if you go out into a field that you never planted seed in
Mm-hmm.
and it's just dirt, that's what you sowed. Or if you planted corn, don't expect watermelons, or
Right.
vice versa. So I think in our lives we planted very different seeds
Yeah.
at different rates and different consistencies for a long period of time. And we've been married, how many years before all this? 13, 14, something like that, right?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
12, 13.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we had been in very different paces. Namely, our relationship with the Lord, very different spaces and places. They're never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's an unrealistic idea that you'll have that. But like in ministry, like I give my whole life to that, like unapologetically. She had shared, and we'll even say this, but like I'd been kind of afraid and not trusting for a long time. So there'd been minimal there. So the fruitlet's not going to be the same. And then on top of that, like that's what I do. It'd be like if I decided to go into the education space and teaching and think that today I'll be able to teach like a man. It's not going to happen. I'm not, that's not what I am. Could I learn and grow? Yeah, absolutely. So making a decision to come together and start over, it's going to take time in the recovery process and the restoration process to get on the same wavelength again.
Yeah.
And I think it can't be overstated, the necessity of like committing and realizing. You got to understand it's going to take a while. It just is.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be stoked. You're going to be frustrated at your partner in both ways of like, hey, God, why is this taking you so freaking long to figure this out? And then just understand that every time you feel that way, they're also going to feel that way. And if you can hold on long enough, eventually that pain, it dials down a bit. And then you're able to start to see, oh, there's some fruit here. There's some patterns. Oh, I like this. Or, oh, this is a new thing that I'm actually, I think one of the more profound moments in our counseling and or like when we were really in a bad spot was with Lyle and Allison had done a call with us. And I was, when we, aired our dirty laundry for the umpteenth time with another person and counselor. And it was just like at an impasse where I was just like, I feel nothing, like that's where I was at that point. And he said the most profound Lyle thing he could ever say. It's like, well, sounds like you got a new wife and you need to get to know her. Yeah. And I couldn't argue with his Lyle logic. It made sense. And it was like, you know what? You're not wrong. I don't like what you're saying. I'm not happy about where I am. I'm not happy about the situation, but that this is true. I'm just going to have to give it time. And there's a lot of truth in that. So like if you happen to be in this situation, maybe it's like this, maybe it's different. It's probably, your own flavor of crazy. Everybody's got their own flavor that they like. But understanding that recovery takes time. Yeah. And even so I'll talk about this because, we talked about shame. We talked about feeling like sheepish re-entering a space and like, do I have anything to say? Is anyone going to listen? My thing was, do I have authority to speak on this? Like I sound like I'm full of it to say, I'm going to proclaim, but also at the same hand, the Lord's only talked to me a few times in the last few years. And this was one of the things he said. And he said, I want you to go proclaim recovery. And I'm like, well, I am not the guy,
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I
looking around for the other person he's
just
talking
for
to.
somebody, another Justin that needs to proclaim this message. So I had to get over myself in that regard and say, hey, I feel all these things and I'm still going to do what he asked me to do. And I think that could be true for you. Like you could feel insecure, but it doesn't matter because he's asking you to step out. Yeah. And we'd gotten even a few words, to talk about the prophetic. And I want to say this too. Like through all of this, I am more deeply anchored and unshakable in the fact that God speaks to us. Yeah. And that prophecy is a beautiful thing that is very, 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 very good. I want to stress that. And that the devil really wants to convince you that it's bad. That's not a good thing and that you shouldn't earnestly desire it and that it's only pain. And it's just not true. Like if you can hold on, it's really worth it. Yeah. People are the worst. I'll tell you that. People are awful. People suck hard. They're the worst. And That's just true. And
Yeah.
if you understand that, it'll make it. But God is great, right?
Yeah.
So, but prophecy is good. The prophetic is good. And if I'm also convinced that if the devil could almost convince me that I'm insane and that I don't hear the Lord, then you may struggle with that from time to time too. And it doesn't matter always. Um, it's not the primary thing. It does matter, but like how you feel or your guttural, visceral response to what he says is not greater than what he says.
Mhm.
You know, what do you have to say? I don't want to go too much longer on this because
Yeah.
we're about at time.
Yeah.
But
No, I think what you said was spot on. It's going to take time. And if you are the person who is walking through changing and repenting and healing and doing things differently than you did before, it can feel very frustrating in the moment because I had experienced significant deliverance, significant breakthrough that could not be articulated in one moment to him the way that it was in my spirit, in my soul, in my body, in my mind, and things that had in an instant miraculously changed because of the hand of the Lord. And that was not going to be his perception, his perspective, or any of those things. And so I had to settle in to this is going to take time. I remember one of the most powerful shifts because it felt daunting every day to get up and realize that I was going to have another conversation with him about how much pain he was experiencing and how much resentment he had and how much anger he had.
It was a long time.
It was like every day, multiple times a day.
So much frustration.
And it was just like a lot. And I could hear it. And what he was saying was not wrong. But that was no longer me. It had God had literally done a miraculous work in me. And I knew that what he was saying was no longer true about me. But I could not in that moment say, sorry, that's not true anymore. And write that off.
Yeah.
I had to listen. And I needed to hear it. And I needed to feel it. And I needed to do all of those things. And I remember talking to my therapist, and he said, Amanda, if I told you that you needed to have 100 more hard conversations like you're having, that after that 100th conversation, it was all going to be fixed, would you keep doing it? And I said, yeah, I would do it for 100 conversations. He said, okay, what if I told you it was going to be 500 conversations? I would have 500 conversations. And he said, okay, just imagine that you're going to have 500 conversations. And when you have that 501 conversation, it's going to click and everything's going to be the way that it was. And because for me, it felt endless in that moment of waking up day in, day out, drudging up the pain over and over again when I felt so completely different on the inside. And he just said, just imagine that in 100 conversations, it's going to be over. He said, just do that.
Yeah.
And then he said, if the benchmark changes, 500 conversations, would you do it?
That's good.
Absolutely. And so I think that is the most powerful thing is time.
It is.
It really is.
And
it sucks to hear it.
Yeah.
Time sucks, but it's the most powerful thing.
Yeah. And also too, I'll never pay the price for my poor decisions. Other people will. And that's the thing about like grace and mercy is like, that's where you can, I'm sorry, and repentance and deliverance are beautiful things.
Yeah.
But they're not evidence. They're encounter based.
Yeah.
And they may be real for you. They're like a sign gift. And I think just like if I went out and had an affair tonight and I got some girl pregnant and I said, I'm sorry tomorrow, I would be sorry. I would be repentant, but there would still be another woman carrying my child, and the repercussions for that decision would live on.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that I would have to say, I'm sorry. a few more times.
Yeah.
And there would be actions that go on. So I think part of the thing of like holding these two truths in tension
Yeah.
is that like, hey, our words, our actions, our decisions, they affect more than us.
Yeah.
And they affect longer than now.
Yeah.
And if we understand this, we'll make better decisions that'll have less of a ripple and a negative connotation. And on the flip side, your decisions that you make that are positive can really, you can choose to give life to people, or you can choose to suck life out of them. And if you choose to give life, it's just going to go better for you. So like, regardless of what side of the coin you happen to find yourself on now, because we're on both sides all the time.
Yeah.
I've been on, like we can flip it and go back and forth depending on the case or the situation or whatever. There's nothing God can't restore, recover, or rehabilitate with enough time. And also, you get to co-labor in that. I get to co-labor. We get to co-labor in that process. So do you have a closing thought?
Gosh.
Because we've been talking a long time.
We have been talking a long time. Man, thanks. If you have made it to the end of this, I'm so thankful.
If you need a good therapist.
we know some people we hook up. Just keep going. I mean, don't give up.
Yeah.
It's not over. If it's not good, it's not over.
It's not over till you quit.
Yeah.
Till somebody quits.
Yeah.
And even if somebody quits or you quit, you can just wake
over.
up and say, hey, I'm going to try again. That's all right. That's allowed.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You're okay to feel how you feel in the process. And, feelings are not the end all be all for everything.
And they're not always the mile markers you need to pace your journey on either.
Yeah. And I just think that when all is said and done, hopefully more is done than said. Yeah. That's where I'll leave it. But this has been this one.
This one was real.
This one was real. This one's going to be.
We went there.
This is the thing. Yeah. So this has been The Road Home. This is episode 3. And then we'll have another one. Probably we've been doing this on Fridays. The moment that I say we're going to do it on a Friday, we won't do it on a Friday.
Then we'll have a Friday.
Again,
we can't.
If this impacts you and you want to, connect with us, you can message us on here. Yeah. You can message us Instagram.
Yeah. Fortified Families on Instagram. Fortified-families.org is our website.
Yeah.
Sign up for our newsletter.
Share this with a friend.
Coming out.
Literally, we were having coffee the other morning at a random space, and somebody yelled, "Hey, Justin, I was watching your podcast the other night." It was a friend I haven't seen in 4 years. He's like, "We watched it the other night, and it was really impactful." So if this impacts you, or someone that it would, please share it with them. And if you want to help support us in this and help us bring up the production quality, you can do that Fortified as well. Yeah. Love you guys much. We're out. I'm tired. This was my 30% night, and I did this.
You did great.
I don't know.
You gave it. You gave it your all.
I gave it my 30%. So, all right, guys, we out. Be blessed. This is when I reach over and end it.